The pet in the deep stars beyond the last known human colony, a powerful species ruled many planets. They were called the Drevians. Their bodies were tall and thin with skin that shimmered like metal under sunlight. Their minds were sharp and cold, and they believed they stood above all other creatures. They saw humans as nothing more than lower beings full of emotion and noise. After the fall of Earth, many humans were taken by Drevi nobles. They were not used as workers or soldiers, but kept as strange decorations. They were called pets. One of these humans was a young man named Leo. He lived in a golden tower with a Drevi girl named Kira. Her father was a high minister of the Drevi Council. Their home floated above the clouds of the capital world. Servants moved through quiet halls and robots cleaned the shining floors. Kira was still learning the ways of power. Her father kept her away from politics and danger. Leo was given to her on her birthday as a gift. At first she laughed and clapped like a child. She made him wear strange clothes and sit beside her during feasts. She called him soft names and smiled when he fetched her books or followed her to the gardens. But Leo was not what he seemed. He acted calm and quiet. He obeyed and stayed near Kira at all times. He learned how to move without sound, how to understand Drevi speech, how to listen and remember everything. He was not just watching. He was waiting. Every night when Kira slept, Leo sat by the window, looking at the stars. Somewhere beyond those stars was Earth, or what remained of it. He did not remember much of home. Only fire and shouting and the cold chains of a Drevi ship. He remembered others who fought back and fell. He remembered the promise he made in his heart. He would never forget who he was. One morning the tower was full of guests. Important Drevi lords came to speak with Kira's father. Guards stood at every door. The air smelled of chemicals and pride. Kira was told to stay quiet during the meetings. She took Leo with her to a smaller hall where she could watch the city through a glass wall. Leo noticed the guards were not the usual ones. Their steps were heavy and slow. Their armor had no marks. He caught the eyes of one and saw nothing inside. No loyalty, no training, just cold duty. Something was wrong. He tried to pull Kira away from the hall. She laughed and told him to stop acting silly. He pointed toward the guards and shook his head. She only smiled and told him to sit down. Outside, the main chamber Drevi voices rose in anger. Words like betrayal and warning echoed through the walls. Kira stood up confused. Then the lights flickered. Leo stood between her and the door. A blast shook the floor. Smoke poured in. From the side hallway, a group of masked figures entered with plasma blades and shock rifles. They moved fast and silent, cutting down two guards. One pointed at Kira. She froze. Leo moved. He jumped over a table and slammed into the first attacker. No one expected it. A human was not supposed to fight like that. He grabbed the enemy's arm and twisted it until bone cracked. The rifle dropped. Leo picked it up and fired into the second one's leg. The blast hit metal and sparks flew. Kira fell back, covering her face. The last attacker charged with a blade, but Leo ducked low and grabbed a chair. He swung it into the alien's chest. The force pushed the figure into the wall. Without stopping, Leo ran and crushed the weapon hand with his foot. 3 attackers lay broken on the ground. Blood and sparks covered the floor. Kira stared at Leo, her eyes wide, her mouth open. She had never seen anyone fight like that, not even trained Drevi soldiers. Leo turned to her slowly and reached out. His hand. She took it. They ran through the smoke. Alarms echoed through the tower. Distant shouts and warning sirens followed them. Kira asked what was happening. Leo said nothing. He only looked ahead, his steps sure and fast. He guided her through narrow doors and old service shafts. He knew the path. He had learned it long ago when no one was watching. In the lower levels, they stopped to catch breath. Kira leaned against the wall, her hands shaking. She asked if he was hurt. Leo shook his head. She asked who those attackers were. He did not answer. He only looked up toward the lift and waited. More voices echoed above. The tower was under attack. Kira touched Leo's arm and whispered thank you, her voice soft. Her eyes no longer full of play or command. For the first time she saw him not as a pet, but as a person who saved her life. Leo did not reply. He looked at her and then at the hallway beyond. His face calm, but his eyes full of something old and quiet and burning. He had waited long for this moment, not to fight, not to hurt, but to protect Doc, to show them what a human really was. The pet had teeth, and the galaxy would soon learn the difference. The threat. The lower halls of the tower felt like a forgotten maze. Pipes lined the ceilings, wires hung loose, dust covered the corners. Leo moved through them with silent steps like he had walked those paths 100 times. Kira followed close. Behind her eyes wide, her voice quiet, her trust now deeper than fear. Above them, the sounds of battle still echoed, blasts, thuds, orders screamed through the coms. The Drevi tower was no longer safe, no longer untouchable. Kira tried to ask questions. Again her words fast, her voice shaking. She asked who those people were, why they attacked, who Leo really was. But Leo gave no answers. He only raised a hand to silence her and led her forward. They reached a small chamber near the old escape shaft. Leo pushed aside a metal panel and found a hidden console. He tapped buttons carefully. The screen glowed faint blue. Kira looked around confused. She had never seen this part of the tower. Leo knew this place because he had studied it every night in secret, while others slept, while guards drank, while servants laughed. He had watched maps, hacked doors, learned the weak spots. Not for escape, but for survival. He pulled out 2 small shock rods from a hidden drawer. He handed one to Kira. She looked at it unsure, but took it with both hands. Kira finally spoke clearly, her voice stronger now. She said she had never seen anyone fight like that, not even trained Drevi soldiers. She asked again who were those attackers. Leo paused. He looked at her for a long moment, his face blank but his eyes sharp. Then he slowly raised 3 fingers. 3. Drevi families had tried to remove her father from the council. They had been gathering strength for months, waiting for the right moment. Now they had made their move, and she was the target. Kira understood finally, her mind racing. The attack was not random, it was planned, it was personal. She was not just the daughter of power, now she was a piece in a larger game. Leo reached for a small comm device and tuned into the emergency channel. He listened carefully to the codes, the orders, the locations. Some guards had turned, some remained loyal, but most were gone. The tower was falling from inside. He closed the device and looked back at her. There was only one way out. They moved through the maintenance shaft that ran below the council towers. The path was narrow, dark, full of steam and noise. Leo walked first, shielding her from falling metal and broken glass. Along the way they passed 2 bodies of tower guards. Leo checked for signs of life, but found none. He took one of their energy blades and handed it to Kira. She hesitated, but accepted it this time without questioning. A brief pause. Leo looked through a broken panel to the city outside. Fires burned in parts of the capital. Ships hovered above, searching for movement. Something bigger was happening, not just a family war, but chaos across the system. Kira asked him again how he knew all this, how he could move so well, how he could fight like a trained killer. Leo turned to her and touched his own chest, then pointed to his head, then back to his eyes. He had not been trained by anyone. He had learned by watching, remembering, adapting. He had not spoken for years, but he had never stopped thinking. Kira whispered something to herself, but he caught it. She said he was not a pet, he was something else, something more. They reached the exit tunnel that led to the outer edge of the city ring. From there they could reach her father's backup transport, if it was still there. But a group of armed Drevi soldiers blocked the path. Their armor bore no crest, no name, only black marks across the chest. Leo pushed Kira behind a metal crate and scanned the area. The soldiers were scanning ID chips, shooting anything that moved that was not part of their group. Leo looked at her again, his face calm, his hands steady. He placed his blade in her hand and took the shock rod instead. She tried to stop him, but he shook his head. Then he stood and walked into the open slowly, arms raised, pretending to surrender. The soldier shouted orders, one moved forward to grab him. Leo dropped low and drove the rod into the soldier's knee. The armor sparked, the Drivi fell screaming. In the same motion, Leo grabbed the dropped rifle and fired 3 shots before the others could. Aim. Kira jumped from behind the crate and struck another soldier with the blade just as Leo took down the last one with the rifle butt. The fight ended. In seconds, she stood there breathing hard, her hands red, her eyes burning. Leo looked at her and nodded once, moved on toward the outer gate. In the distance, the sky glowed with fire. More towers were burning, more ships were landing. The Drivi world was cracking from within. Kira spoke again, this time not asking, but stating. She said they would not make it out if they stayed alone. They needed help and she knew where to find it. Leo tilted his head, curious. She said there was another tower. An old friend of her father lived there, someone who still held honor and power. If they could reach him, they might find allies. Leo agreed with a single glance and turned toward the new path. Behind them, the tower they once called home crumbled under its own weight. The pet had drawn blood. The Empire would never see humans the same way again. The escape. The night was darker than usual over the Drivi capital. Red warning lights blinked across the sky as ships circled like vultures above a wounded world. The streets were quiet but tense. Smoke hung in the air like a low fog. Buildings that once stood tall now trembled. Trust had vanished. Leo and Kira moved through the outer sectors near the old transport rings. Their steps were silent, their breaths slow, their eyes sharp. They stayed low behind crates, walls, broken transport vehicles. Each turn could mean safety or death. Kira no longer asked questions. Her hands gripped the blade tightly, her clothes dirty, her face streaked with ash. She was no longer the soft girl of the tower. She was something harder now, shaped by fear and truth. Leo led the way, always checking shadows, windows, rooftops. He held the stolen rifle close, his body ready for sudden movement. Every sound, every flicker, every breath around them passed through his mind. He was not rushing. He was hunting. They reached a small alley behind an old merchant station. Leo paused and signaled her to wait. He moved ahead and scanned the area. He found an old door marked with a single crest, a circle split by a diagonal line. He knocked once, then twice, then once again. A small slit opened. A Drivi eye peeked through. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door slid open. Inside stood an older Drivi named Bryn. His clothes were plain, his voice calm, his face tired. He was once a friend of Kira's father, a man who walked away from politics when lies replaced truth. Bryn looked at Kira with a long stare, then nodded slowly. He led them inside a small room filled with tools, scraps, old tech, and maps. Kira told him what had happened. She spoke fast but clear, her voice no longer soft. She told of the attack, of the betrayal of the guards who turned, of the tower that fell. Bryn listened in silence. He looked at Leo from time to time, his gaze unreadable. When Kira finished, Bryn stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. He told her the Empire was cracking from its center. The council had split. Armies no longer followed orders. Power was now a game of fear and fire. Kira asked if he would help them. Bryn said yes, but warned that help came with danger. He said there were others hidden in the old sector, not Drivi, but humans. Kira looked at Leo, confused. Leo stepped forward slowly and placed a hand on the map. He pointed to an area near the waste fields. Bryn nodded. There was a shelter there, an old transport hub turned into a hidden den. Many humans lived there, taken as pets, lost in the city or left behind. Some were broken, but some were waiting, like Leo, waiting for a reason to rise. Kira and Bryn took a small hover vehicle and rode through the dark roads toward the waste sector. Leo sat at the back, watching every corner, every shadow. They reached the shelter before dawn. The place was hidden beneath old cargo platforms. The door was guarded by 2 humans. They raised weapons when they saw the Dreevy girl, but lowered them when Leo stepped forward. They knew his face inside the shelter. Voices whispered around them. Faces turned, eyes watched. Leo walked through them like a leader returning home. A man named Tom stepped forward, strong eyes, calm hands. He hugged Leo and welcomed him back. Kira saw how these people looked at Leo, not as a pet, not as a servant, but as something more, a symbol, a guide, a weapon in waiting. Leo spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. He said the Dreevy power was falling, that humans had a chance, that they had waited long enough. Tom and the others listened closely. Leo said they would not run, they would not hide. They would fight, not for revenge, but for place, for respect, for the right to stand without chains. Kira stood beside him, her eyes locked on the group. She said she would help, she would use her name, her codes, her access to open doors. The humans agreed. The next hours were spent in motion. Old weapons were cleaned. Drones were repaired, maps were drawn. Leo moved through every step, guiding, checking, training. He showed them how to hold a blade, where to aim, where to move, how to break. Dreevy armor, where to strike with power. Kira watched him, not as a pet, not even as a friend, but as a soldier, as a protector. As someone who had waited for this moment all his life. That night a message came through one of the old comm channels. A rebel Dreevy general had taken over a council tower and was holding Kira's father. He planned to use him as a trophy to declare his rule. Kira's hands shook for a second, then steadied. She turned to Leo. Leo nodded. The time had come. They would not wait for rescue, they would become the storm. The pet was now the pack leader, and the Dreevy would feel what it meant when a human stood not behind chains, but in front of the fire. War beast. The air inside the shelter grew heavy with purpose. Old fears fell silent. Tools became weapons. Faces once full of sorrow now showed fire. The humans who once crawled through broken tunnels now stood with straight backs and sharpened blades. Leo walked among them, slow and steady, his presence enough to stir the quiet into action. Tom gathered the fighters near the map wall. Kira stood beside him, pointing at the council tower where her father was held. The tower stood high with steel wings and was guarded from every side. The rebel Dreevy general had claimed it as his own throne. No ships flew near it without permission, no words escaped without approval. Kira explained the entry points where they energy gates linked the lifts, where old access codes could still unlock hidden doors. She had memorized those codes since childhood, but now they were keys to war. Leo moved between the groups, teaching them how to move as one, how to stay low, how to strike with timing. He corrected grip stances, aim until every hand knew its weapon. Like a part of the body, Bryn worked with Tom to prepare distraction units. They gathered old drones and linked them to overload packs. They would fly over the outer wall, draw attention, and then burst in light and sound. It would not cause harm, but would blind and confuse. As dawn approached, the shelter came alive with motion. Humans wrapped armor around their arms, painted marks on their faces, tied cloth around their hands. They no longer looked like lost pets. They looked like warriors of a forgotten world rising again. Kira stepped outside the shelter, her face calm but her heart burning. She looked at the stars, then back at the path ahead. This was no longer a mission to save one man, this was a message to the Empire. Leo stepped beside her, holding a blade longer than his arm, its edge shaped from Dreevy steel. He had no words for her, only a look that spoke of readiness. The team moved in 3 groups. One would breach the lower gate using Bryn's code and the old tunnel. The second would strike from the sky using the drones and distraction bombs. The third, led by Leo and Kira, would enter through the side transport deck and climb to the main hall where the general waited. The journey to the tower was silent. The city slept in fear. Shadows watched from behind sealed windows. Leo led the way, his steps never slowing, his breath never breaking. They reached the edge of the tower and waited for the signal. A soft hum rose in the air as drones moved across the roof like small birds. Seconds later, they burst in waves of light. The sky flashed white and red, the guards shouted and scrambled. Group 1 breached the lower gate, cut wires, moved through smoke like ghosts. Group 2 dropped from the sky, took the wall before alarms could rise. Leo moved fast through the deck hallway, cutting down 2 guards with a blade before they could raise a weapon. His team followed behind, clearing corners, placing jammers, blocking. The tower's alert. Kira moved through the inner doors using her prints and codes. Each door that opened brought them closer to the heart of the tower. Her hands shook once, but Leo placed a hand over hers and steadied it without a word. At last they reached the upper hall, where the general sat on a raised seat with 2 elite guards beside him. Kira's father stood to the side, chained but still upright. His eyes opened wide when he saw her, and Leo the general laughed. He stood and mocked them, called Leo a broken pet, called the humans rats in armor. He raised a blade and ordered his guards to attack. Leo stepped forward, calm and cold, his eyes locked on the general. The guards charged first, weapons high, voices loud. Leo dodged the first swing and struck low, cutting through armor. He turned and blocked the second strike with his forearm, then slammed his blade into the enemy's shoulder. 1 fell, the other backed away bleeding. General growled and stepped down from his seat, his blade glowing with fire energy. He lunged forward, aiming for Kira, but Leo moved faster, blocking the strike with a sharp clash. The fight turned into a storm of movement, metal against metal, sparks flying with every hit. Kira ran to her father and unlocked the chains, her hands working fast. He held her close for a moment, then turned to watch the fight that now shook the hall. Leo and the general circled each other, stepping wide, blades dancing. The general struck with fury, Leo answered with precision. One fought with rage, the other with purpose. The final blow came when Leo feinted left, then spun low and sliced through the general's leg. The Drivi fell with a roar of pain. Leo pressed the blade to his throat, his face blank. The general cursed him again, called him an animal, a thing beneath the stars. Leo leaned close and whispered something no one else heard. Then he stood, walked away, and let the general live with defeat. Kira stepped beside him as the guards surrendered. Humans took control of the hall and secured the doors. The tower was theirs. Outside, the message spread like fire. Humans had taken a council tower, without ships, without bombs, only blades and heart. The image of Leo standing beside Kira filled every screen across the capital. He was no longer a pet, he was the war beast of the uprising, the reckoning. The sky over the capital shifted as the news moved faster than the wind. 1 tower had fallen, not by bombs or warships, but by human hands, by blades, by a spark no one had seen coming. Across the city, screens showed the same image again and again, Leo standing tall beside Kira, his blade lowered, his face calm but fierce, his eyes set on something beyond victory. Inside the captured council tower, silence filled the main hall. The Drivi general still lay wounded, his pride shattered, his army gone. His weapons had been taken, his power stripped without mercy. Around him the humans worked quickly, clearing halls, setting new defenses, sealing all entry points. Kira stood with her father, now free, his robe torn, but his mind sharp. He looked at Leo for a long time without speaking. Then he gave a slow nod, a gesture rare among Drivi, but full of meaning. It was not just respect, it was recognition. Leo did not nod back. He simply turned and walked to the central console. There, he placed the Drivi general's insignia on the screen and activated a direct channel to the Capital Council. Across every tower, every ship, every command room, the live image appeared. Leo stepped into view. Behind him stood humans, armed, focused, proud. Kira stood at his side, not as a Drivi noble, not as a frightened girl, but as an ally who had walked through fire. Leo began to speak slowly, his voice clear, his words heavy. He told them what had happened, what their silence had allowed, what their fear had created. He did not use blame, he did not shout, he did not beg. He only told truth. He spoke of the humans taken as pets, the chains, the collars, the stolen names. He spoke Of the nights spent in silence, the rage hidden under soft smiles, the strength mistaken for weakness. He spoke of choice, of patience, of purpose. He said humans did not come to conquer, but they would not stay broken. They would rise not to rule, but to walk without chains. He looked into the lens with eyes that held no hatred, only promise. He ended the broadcast with one line. You called us pets, but we remembered what it meant to protect the ones we care for across the city, and beyond that. Message echoed into every ear, Drevian human. Some stood in silence, some in awe, some in fear. The Drevi Council met within hours, shaken not by force, but by truth. Voices argued titles, clashed, old powers cracked. But one voice stood above the rest. Kira spoke before the full council, her tone calm, her posture proud. She told them what she had seen, what she had learned, what she had survived. She said humans were not animals. They were people who had been pushed too far. She proposed a new law. The release of all humans held as pets across the empire, and their recognition as allies, not servants. Some Drevi shouted, some laughed, some warned of chaos. Then Leo stepped into the council hall, not with weapons, not with threats, but with quiet strength. He did not speak again. He only looked into their faces one by one, and waited. No one spoke after that. Law passed with heavy hands and silent voices across. The empire collars were unlocked, doors were opened, humans stepped out, blinking into light that no longer burned. Some wept, some laughed, some stood without moving. They had waited too long to believe it. Back in the capital, the council tower was given to the new Human Council. It was small at first, a group of trusted voices who had fought beside Leo and Kira. They did not ask for rule, only space for their kind to live with peace, with dignity. Leo refused all titles. He would not be called leader or king. He returned to the shelter where it had begun. He trained others, helped rebuild, stayed quiet. Kira visited often, walking through the halls without guards, without fear. She would sit with Leo in the quiet garden behind the tower, speaking little, watching the stars pass above people. Across worlds spoke his name, not with fear, not with praise, but with awe. They called him the war beast, not for his strength, but for the way he turned pain into purpose, silence into roar, weakness into power. In time, a statue was raised outside the shelter. It showed a man standing with one hand lowered to lift another. Not to fight, not to rule, but to protect. Children came to see it, not because he was a hero, but because he was real. Leo never spoke of the war again. He did not need to. His story was told in every free breath, in every unlocked collar, in every Drevi who looked at a human and saw not a pet but a person. He had waited, he had watched, he had fought not for revenge but for something better. And in doing so he changed the stars. The end.